Hello, this is Tom, Junkie XL, and welcome again to Studio Time with Junkie XL. Today, in this episode, I'm just going to focus on a few drum computers that I have. Later in this segment, I will show some other drum computers that are not hooked up at this specific point. So, let's start with the first one, the classic of the classic, the TR-909 by Roland. This thing came out somewhere in the early 80s. It's absolutely fantastic drum computer. I have to say, honestly though, with a lot of these drum computers, I don't actually use them actively at this point. I usually sample them and then treat them and then use them in a modern sampler because it's way more practical to deal with them. Nevertheless, it was always so much fun to program rhythms on these boxes. So this actually machine doesn't allow me to play the sounds like you have seen me do in other episodes or on some of the other drum computers where we can get to. So I prepped a rhythm and I'm just going to play a little bit with it so you have a feeling what this thing sounds like. Very fun machine. Now the way that it was set up to program your rhythms is that you had your 16 steps per bar. You could make things a little more complicated by choosing a different signature or how the note length worked. And then basically with this button here, you would select whatever you wanted to program. So if I would go to the bass drum and hit play, I'm just going to turn the volume down so I can actually talk. You see that boom, 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 boom. There's a kick drum on every one. So now I take the second three out. There's only one now. So that was a very easy way to program your rhythms so that you could store them. You had a few variations, but all in all, this was a very limited machine with a great sound. I think Phil Collins used it on In the Air Tonight as the opening rhythm. Obviously, it got adapted by many hip-hop and many dance artists in the 80s, and it is still very popular among the techno fundamentalists in the scene. They really love that box with some of the other boxes. So let's now move over to the 909. So this is the actual classic 909. In a different video, I showed the boutique series, the TR-09, and I honestly have to say, I think the TR-09, the new boutique series, sounds a little better than this original one. I go through this machine rather quickly. Bass drum, snare drum, and also here you had two different ways of programming your rhythm. One was similar to the 808, where in step mode you could program the notes in where you wanted them, but you could with this machine you could also actually play live and program the rhythm. So I have a little pattern here for you prepped. Let's play that pattern. It's a very simple pattern. So the TR-909, a very fun box to play with, and it was of an great value for the development of dance music. So many great bands have made music with this. Underworld, for instance, the Chemical Brothers had it. Orbital, it's been used by so many people. Oh, what I forgot to say about the 808, the 909 and the 808, and many of these drum computers that we'll go through all had individual outputs for every sound. So at this point, you see I only have one cable attached to it, but usually what we would do is we would take all the individual outputs, and then you could EQ it, compress it, and you could actually put effects on them, and that's what makes these boxes also very unique. And this box compared to that box, the TR-808 came out first and then the 909. It has way more options to program. You have more variations, more patterns. Now you can also write tracks, like a complete composition. So it's a very interesting box, I feel, and it was very important for the development of music, both of these boxes. Now we get to another drum computer, which is the DX. I have another one, which I will show in a little bit. That is the DX Stretch. And I will also show you the DX Promer, and I will tell you what you can do with that. So with this box, I want to play the individual sounds. You have the touchpads on here. Let me just play the sounds for. Behind this drum machine, and that's what you see me do right now, is you could actually tune the individual instruments. So let's now play these sounds. I really love this drum computer. It's been used a lot in the 80s, but a similar drum machine to this that I actually don't own, which is a Lindrum, together with a few other drum computers, was used by Prince. And what Prince made very unique is that he was always looking for his own sounds, and he did something with drum computers that nobody did at that specific point. So I'm playing this rhythm again. So these sounds are like, you know, somewhat on the higher side or the middle side. And what Prince did, he tuned everything down as low as he could on the drum computer. So it started to sound like that. And the snare and then especially the hand clap. That must be the most recognizable hand clap probably in history, and it's because Prince used it so much on his first two albums. So I want to program something for you really simple, and then you can show, I can show you how simple these boxes actually all worked. If you would press record and play, you would hear a metronome, and I could start programming. And it doesn't really matter whether I play in time or not, because it has a function that quantizes everything that comes in, and you can choose different values, whether it's 16th note or an 8th note. So let me just continue programming this simple rhythm. And pretty soon we start creating actually something that really sounds like what Prince did on his first couple of albums. I have to say though, he always was very original with his drum sounds on his first 4 or 5 different albums. So this is the Oberheim DX drum computer, really, really nice drum computer. Now we move over to a different box, and I want to reorganize a couple of things here a little bit. I'm just going to move this thing a little forward here for now, and I'm just going to move this thing a little over here so I can access it a little better. Now, this thing looks like a drum machine, and it kind of functions like a drum machine, but it is in fact a sampler. And this is the emulator SP1200. It is very, very popular still among people that make hip-hop, R&B, anybody who is very creative with sampling. And it has a low bit resolution, so it gives it like grit when you sample something. It's nothing to do with the high quality sampling that we can do nowadays in our computer with Contact or with any other sampler. So this machine is mono, it samples mono, and it spits out the samples mono. And you have 8 keypads, and then you have a switch to go to your B section, another 8, C section, another 8, D section, another 8. Oh, just skip there for a second. So this machine has a really great sound to it. And this is what I actually used for Deadpool to create the more like, if you want to call it, Beastie Boys kind of sound. So I took an acoustic drum kit that was recorded, and I took the individual elements and then resampled it back into this box. So let me play you what these sounds sound like. And they're very gritty because of the processing that I did and how it was sampled in here. So let me play the sounds. So there's really actually dirty sounding, and it has a couple of controls here that you can play with. So if we go to tune, so you see there are a couple of controls here that I can use. So what we just did is a combination between or tuning the drum sample lower and higher, or change the decay of the sample. It also has a mix mode where you could just readjust the volume of the individual instruments. And obviously, like the other drum computers that I showed you, you have an opportunity here to press record and just basically play your rhythms and program them and then turn it into a song. But for me, the most interesting thing about this box is the sound that it creates. So I just played you the individual sounds, but how the rhythm actually sounded in the film, and I'm just going to play this live. I always find it fun to play and figure out drum samples by just playing it instead of programming it. So let me just play how that goes. So that was kind of like roughly what the rhythms were for Deadpool made with this box. But now I want to show you something else, because we have been talking about the 909 and the TR-909. And I told you, oh, by the way, floppies. You gotta believe, yeah, you can't believe this. This is not USB. This is not an internal hard drive. This is hardcore floppies, and you better take care of them well, because otherwise you're going to lose everything you have. So I'm just going to want to play you two things, because I sampled the beloved 909 a couple of times by taking these individual sounds and then processing them through a mixing console with compression on it, with EQ on it, sometimes reverb. And then I sample them back into this box, and then I get more grit from it and punch. And I just want to show you that, you know, the difference in sound if we play, you know, the kick here and then how it sounds here. Look at that. That's quite a... Probably I had it set there. You hear the difference in attack and the thickness of it. Oh, that's another cool thing, because the hand clap in a 909 cannot be tuned, but now that I sampled it, I'm getting towards that Prince hand clap that I like so much. It's really cool to... So now I have a 909 processed with my outboard equipment and then resampled into this box. But this is just one type of processing. So now I want to load a different 909 kit that I made that is processed completely different. And that is the beauty, obviously, with sampling. And that was the limitation of the older drum computers, that they were what they were. Until sampling got introduced, then you were able to take these sounds and do something else with them, so they were a little more interesting. So now this is a different type of kick drum, and the snare drum is different processed. Quite different than... or completely different character. And that's the great thing of sampling sounds and then reusing them in a different way to create extra colors and to create drum sounds that are different than the original boxes. And now I'm going to move some more stuff around, and then I'll show you a few more drum computers. I shuffled some stuff around, so we see new boxes. The other ones have been put away where they belong. And now I'd like to focus on two boxes here. pretty much we just covered one of them, which is the Oberheim DX, the drum computer that you can make these really cool print sounds with. Now the one that I have here is a great box because this box is the Stretch DX, which means that it has a couple of extra pads to work with. So you basically have more sounds. You could actually open this thing up, and I'll show that to you, by just unloosing these screws, and obviously don't lose the screws. You can open up the drum computer, and what you see here, this is very interesting, you see all these chips here, and these chips are sound chips. The sounds that you play are stored on these chips, and they're called EPROMs. And this is why I brought this box out, plus the other box, because the box that we're looking at over there is the Oberheim Promer. So maybe you guess where I'm going with this, and that is that you can make your own sounds. So these boxes are not easy to find, but when you do find them, you will have a lot of joy from them if you have one of these classic boxes. So this is the Promer, and you put an EPROM in here, and then you can sample any sounds that you want in here. And once you're done, happy editing, looping, whatever you feel like doing, you can burn it onto an EPROM, and then you can open up this box and just put that EPROM right on a specific slot, and then when you play it, you could actually play the sound that you put in. I definitely would love to do a separate tutorial on that, but it would be a little too much to make that part of the drum computer tutorial at this point. So now I'm going to move back over to the right, and back with Roland. Now we have two other boxes that came out after the 909 and the 808, and these are the TR rhythm composers. This is the 707 and this is the 727. Now the 707, which we'll get to in a second, was a drum computer with kicks, snares, toms, hi-hats, crashes, some percussion. But this computer actually had the full percussion sounds on there. So let me just play and go through these sounds. Bongo, conga, low conga, timbala, low and high, agogo, cabasa, maracas, whistles, long, criada, and chime. If you compare it now, this is why it's so great to show this, is that now it seems like absolutely stupid to spend like a certain amount of money for just these percussion sounds. But back in the day, this was like unique. You know, you needed to have this. And actually, some of the sounds were pretty good for that time, obviously. But now we get to the really interesting part, and we'll talk about that more in future tutorials. And that is circuit bending. So what is circuit bending? Circuit bending is an art form that is done by certain tech guys that open up any of these boxes that you will see in any of these tutorials, and they basically start adding wires and connections and put extra parts in them, and then with switches or with turn knobs or whatever, and it really starts changing the sound of the original drum computer or synthesizer. And there are some great companies that do it. There are also hobbyists who do it, and sometimes you think you did something successful, and then after 5 times using it, the drum computer is dead altogether because you did something that you shouldn't have done. But in this case, this is done by a pro. Let me play you some of the sounds, and then with the circuit bending, what happens. Quite a different sound. And I have more of these switches, so let's just go through a bunch of them to show you what circuit bending can do. I mean, I find that quite amazing that you can do it with that. And that's why I got this little box, because I would never, in my right mind, dream of making a track and using something like this. Oh, did it stop altogether now? Okay, so maybe, did it die? Let's reset it. Maybe it did die. That would be interesting. Anyway, we have no sound anymore. Oh, this is interesting. Live. Okay. I guess this thing can go in a bin. Anyway, let's move on to the next box. This is a machine I would never circuit bend in order to lose it. This is the 707. Another 80s drum computer that actually had a really nice sound to it, also with individual outputs, and you were able to really mix it and match it. And the first band that I was in, Weekend at Waikiki, in the 80s, we had this drum computer, and every track was made with this drum computer. Kick, snare, toms, hi-hats would be taken out individually, and we could really tweak and compress the kick and the snare and the toms with like the right reverb. Let me just go through the sounds. And I prepped a little song for you here. Anyway, so 80s, but a really great sounding box. Okay, so now we go to another box, which is the Drumulator, made famous by Tears for Fears, Shout, their song. And that particular chip, which is called Ambient Rock Kit, if I remember, I still haven't been able to find, but I hope someday I will. Now, the unique thing with the thing that I did with this is that I bought extra sound chips, and I had these switches installed on the front, so I have access to more sounds than just the standard 4 pads that it comes with. So let me now switch this thing on. It didn't quite work as well as I hoped yesterday, but let's see what happens now. Uh-oh. Hey, we have sound. Okay, so again, very 80s. If I start pulling the switches, oh, different kick drum. Also different snare drum. Different snare drum. Anyway, with these switches, you're able to create more different sounds and program more different sounds. This is a really great sounding drum computer. That's what I meant. This is a really good sounding drum computer when it works. And it's part of the emulator family. So this is by the same brand who makes that beautiful SP1200. And you're touching the keyboard on the back, and that's why we hear a note. It's fun, we should leave that in. Anyway, let's now move, yeah, so what I wanted to say, the SP1200 made by emulator, so is the Drumulator. Like I said earlier on, usually I make sounds in these things, and then when I get the sound, I immediately sample it and just throw it into the computer, so I do not have to deal with a drum computer crashing or being really weird or anything like that, because that is what happens with old equipment. So a lot of these boxes go in and out of the repair shop because something is wrong, and usually it's very small stuff and not really all that expensive to repair. Now let's put this piece of garbage. Oh, let's just try if it works right now. Let's just. This is a peace of mind, you know. Maybe, or maybe not. Did I put it in the right output? Let's see. Oh, let's start with that. That makes a whole difference. I think, actually, this might be gone. Anyway, that sort of thing happens. Let's see. Circuit bending is always at your complete own risk. No insurance company will insure any of that. So be aware if you do it. Next and last of the drum computers is the Yamaha RX7 out of the series RX5, RX7, and I think the 21 and a few other ones. This is a very complicated drum computer, to be honest. A typical Yamaha style, it has multiple menus, where all these other drum computers are so easy and quickly accessible. This was a box that, you know, spun your head when it came to operating system. And Yamaha created a culture that would continue to spin people's brains for 30 years to come with their operating systems. Even though the products that they make were unbelievably good, they're hard to deal with. Now, let's go to this thing. Let's see, we are on key S. Yeah, the thinking already starts here. What I really wanted to show you first is the type of sounds that were in here. And they varied from kick drums, snare drums, percussion, bass sounds, guitar sounds, orchestral hits. It really came with a big variety of sounds that you could really edit quite a lot and then reprogram them again. So what was interesting with this is that you could program, let's say, a snare drum with a really high pitch, and then you could change the pitch of the snare drum, program the snare drum again, and then you could program a low snare drum, but the old snare drum you programmed is still that high pitch. Very, very smart. Not many drum computers were able to do that. Like for instance on the DX, when you tune the snare down, every snare you have programmed will be tuned down. But this computer, drum computer, that was not the case. You could multiply do that. So let's just go through the sounds a little bit so you have an idea what this thing was all about. So let's now choose a different key, this one here. So here we see completely different sounds, marimba even, orchestral hits. Guitar sound. So I'm just going to put my glasses on. Now we can go to voice edit. And now I need to choose a job in order to get somewhere. So let's now take pitch job number 2, which is the pitch. So now we have the guitar here. I made a mistake because first in the job I need to select the voice that I want to edit. That's what I'm saying. This is a very convoluted thing. Okay, so now we have the right selection done. Now we go back to job number 2. You know, this is actually quite interesting for that time period that you had sounds like this that you could edit. So let's go to another job, which is decay, job 03. Very short. So this was a very interesting feature that this drum computer had to offer. And I just want to go, well, this sound is going to keep on playing until tomorrow because I put the decay like so low. But let's now go to that same key and we go to key assign, which means that now I could actually choose the different sounds, and I will continue to play you the type of sounds that this drum computer had.
Get funky!
As you can see, it's quite some interesting sounds. And then it had 32 pads. So it was actually quite fun to make rhythms and arrangements with these things, and I actually made a lot of music with this in the 80s. And but when I really started my artist career, like in the late 80s, pretty much everything was sample based, and I was not really using the hardware boxes that much. I would sample them, like I've shown you with the SP1200, and then do stuff with it and create something extra cool with it. That brings us to the end of the drum computer workshop, and show you some of the drum computers that I have. Maybe in another tutorial I show some other ones, because there's still some really great other drum computers out there that we didn't show in this episode. Only one computer died in this one, so that's not a bad score. And I hope you really enjoyed watching it, and I'll see you in another episode.